My son's prom date's father arrived at 2 a.m. Your son drugged my daughter and left her in a parking lot tonight. I stared at the man standing on my porch in the darkness, his face twisted with rage and something else I couldn't identify. Behind him in his truck, I could see a girl slumped in the passenger seat, her prom dress torn at the shoulder, mascara streaking down her pale face. My stomach dropped as I recognized her. Natasha, the girl my son Cooper had been talking about for weeks leading up to tonight. The doorbell had woken me from the first decent sleep I'd had in months, and now I stood in my pajamas trying to process words that didn't make sense. Cooper drugged someone? My 17-year-old son who still asked permission before eating the last cookie? The man stepped closer, and I could smell alcohol on his breath mixed with something sharper. Fear, maybe, or adrenaline. His name was Richard Moss, and I'd met him briefly when Cooper picked up Natasha for prom 6 hours ago. He'd seemed friendly then, shaking my hand firmly, taking photos of the kids with their matching corsage and boutonniere. Now his eyes were wild, and his fists were clenched at his sides. He said Natasha had called him from a gas station parking lot at midnight, barely able to form words, saying Cooper had put something in her drink at the after-prom party. Richard had driven there immediately and found his daughter stumbling around the parking lot alone, her phone clutched in one shaking hand, unable to remember how she'd gotten there or where Cooper had gone. She'd been sick in his truck on the way home, he said, and kept drifting in and out of consciousness. I tried to speak, but my mouth was too dry. I managed to ask where Cooper was now, and Richard said he had no idea, that his only concern was getting Natasha home safe and making sure I understood what my son had done before he called the police. The word police made my hands start trembling. I asked if he'd taken Natasha to the hospital, and his face darkened. He said she refused to go, that she was terrified and humiliated and just wanted to be in her own bed. I told him she needed medical attention immediately if she'd been drugged, that we needed to know what was in her system, that evidence needed to be collected. Richard's expression shifted to something like disgust. He said I was already making excuses, already trying to cover for my son instead of taking responsibility for raising someone capable of this. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. I stepped back and asked if I could speak to Natasha directly, if I could hear what happened from her. Richard blocked my path toward his truck and said absolutely not, that I wasn't going anywhere near his daughter ever again. He said he'd given me the courtesy of telling me in person before involving the police, but that courtesy was over. He pulled out his phone, and I watched him dial while my brain scrambled to catch up with everything happening. I asked him to wait. Please just wait 1 minute while I tried to reach Cooper and figure out what was going on. Richard laughed bitterly and said there was nothing to figure out, that the facts were simple. My son had drugged his daughter and abandoned her. Everything else was just details. I ran inside to grab my phone from the kitchen counter, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped it twice. Cooper's location was still shared with me through the family tracking app we'd set up when he first started driving. The little dot showing his phone's location sat unmoving at an address I didn't recognize, about 15 minutes from our house. I tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. Tried texting with no response. I went back to the front door where Richard was still standing, now speaking to someone on his phone in a low, urgent voice. I told him I had Cooper's location and could go get him right now, that we could all sit down together and sort this out. Richard ended his call and stared at me with contempt. He said the police were on their way to my house and I should stay put unless I wanted to be charged with interfering in an investigation. Full story on my channel and linked below.